Senator, well, first of all, some of your colleagues in the House are not going tonight. You are going, and how do you plan to protest or kind of take in this speech?
Well, I have always supported the process, right? And it is really important. I mean, I actually have walking pneumonia right now, which is why I have my mask on. But I thought it was really important to honor the institution of the United States, and I think it's important to listen to President Trump.
And, there's a lot of headwinds right now, market sell-off, tariffs, trade war, Ukraine. Can he make a case that things are turning around for the better?
I don't think he can make that case at all. In fact, he's made things worse. The Dow has dropped significantly. The prices of everyday products is much higher. Eggs, milk, everything is much higher than it was before he took office. He's not made life better for the American people.
On Ukraine, now we're hearing there might be a minerals deal struck. Do you anticipate he's going to say something about some sort of deal with security guarantee?
Well, I don't think the reality matters. I mean, Donald Trump can't even answer the question of whether or not Russia invaded Ukraine. So he's going to make up his own reality. But bottom line, he's cozied up to Vladimir Putin at the expense of our allies. And frankly, Ukraine right now with Vladimir Zelensky is holding off the Russians. The next countries in that line are NATO allies who, if they were to become under attack by Russia, would invoke Article 5 of the NATO treaty and for mutual defense. And so we need to make sure that we stand up to Putin and not kowtow to him, which is what President Trump is doing.
So, Congressman, from what we hear, the president's theme is kind of an American renewal, although we have a lot of headwinds right now. Sell-off on the stock market, immediate trade war, it appears, and the conflict in Ukraine. Can the president really make that case with all these things happening?
Well, absolutely. This is a night for the president to talk about his vision for the country, to build off his inauguration speech, and look at the last 5 weeks, what he's been able to do. Illegal immigration across our southern border has gone to a trickle, right? Because of the Remain in Mexico policy he put in place, getting rid of catch and release. He's focused on the economy. Belvedere, Illinois, in my district, 1,500 new workers announced coming back because of President Trump and his initiative to bring that plant back. Yesterday, there was an announcement by a semiconductor company from Taiwan, a $100 billion investment. So I think what you're going to hear tonight is the president's vision on fixing the economy, fixing the unmitigated disaster at our southern border. And if you look at the election, what never changed in the election is 70% of the people thought the country was headed in the wrong direction. Republicans, Democrats, Independent, predicated on the economy and fixing the border. And that's what he's focused on. I think we'll hear a lot about that tonight.
What about layoffs of federal workers? I mean, as federal workers in your district, we've seen these town halls in Republican districts where folks are perhaps pushing back on that a little bit. Do you want him to push back on some of this?
Well, I think it has to be put in the context, Paris, of we're $36 trillion in debt. This would be a much easier conversation if we were $36 trillion in surplus. But when you have that much debt, you had to figure out how you cut back. And so I think taking a scalpel approach and not a sledgehammer approach is the right way to do that. But anything in government should be made more efficient, more effective, more accountable. Get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. So the DOJ Commission that's been put in place, somewhat controversial, but it ought to be looking for ways to stop redundancies. And if we're doing things in 6 different agencies the same way, why can't we reduce that? And so there will be a push to do that. Now, all of those changes are going to have to go through Congress. They can be recommended, they can be suggested, but we're going to have to vote.
So you're saying DOJ can't just unilaterally do? Does that include USAID? Does Congress have to vote on that, or do all these DOJ cuts have to go through Congress?
Well, USAID was created through a non-statutory provision, so the president has the discretion to do that. But the vast majority of other cuts and suggestions and revisions that we have to make to the government is going to have to go through Congress.
Does that mean you might pare back? Democrats are talking about the next shoe to fall is Medicaid. Do you anticipate big cuts in Medicaid? And will that hurt residents in your district?
Well, I think you got to be careful. Again, I say you take a scalpel approach and not a sledgehammer approach. But like Medicaid, Medicare, some of these programs, again, to not have a different set of eyes looking at them, we wouldn't be doing our job, right? So if you can make changes and revisions and, for instance, able-bodied working Americans, if there's a way to get them off Medicaid and get them into a good-paying job, why shouldn't we be trying to do that? And so if we have to make some tweaks and changes to Medicaid to do that, I call those positive revisions and changes, not cuts.
On Ukraine, the Republican Party had traditionally been very staunchly anti-Russia, anti-Soviet Union in the past, staunchly in favor of Ukraine. Are you concerned about what's happening? I mean, it changes as we speak. Apparently now there might be a minerals deal to be signed. So are you going to push back a little bit on Ukraine?
Well, I serve on our House Intelligence Committee, so I follow this issue very closely. And I have supported funding for Ukraine because I wanted Ukraine to win. And I will also just say Putin is a thug. He is a dictator. He's an international criminal. He ought to be in jail. And we can't trust Putin in this process. But I also realize this is a war of attrition. We've given Ukraine a lot of money and a lot of resources to win this war. Victory is not in the sight. So why don't we figure out a way to have a resolution? And so I give the president credit. He ran on this in his election. He talked about it. I'm going to end the war. So no one should be surprised about that. I think it's the way we do that. We have to make sure that we protect Ukraine and the integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine. But we heard today that Zelensky wants to come back, sign that agreement. So we ought to take him at his word, and we ought to work with our allies in Europe to have a peaceful resolution.
Last question for you. Some Democrats are not showing up. That we've heard different rumors about how they're going to protest. Is it appropriate, for a protocol like this to not show up or to do things like have hand clappers or something in protest?
I think it's short-sighted. People don't like the results of the election, but remember, President Trump won all 7 swing states. He won the popular vote. He won record amounts of African American and Hispanics. The election didn't have any fraud related to it. Our democracy held. Now, people may not like the results, but the people spoke, and he's our president. So I think you ought to at least show up as a member of Congress and listen to the president. You can react however way you want, but I think it's important for the country and the cohesiveness of our democracy to show up and listen.